Morning, all. So here I am discussing other sports to start the day. It's not a weird thing at all, is it? Of course it is. So, so the Tennessee Titans have, it's been interesting. The Tennessee Titans have had 8 people test positive for COVID. 3 of them players, 5 of them personnel. And if it turns out, if they trace it back and it turns out it came in from a trainer or some other personnel that's not a player on the field, well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of exposures have taken place and whether or not that person's job might be in jeopardy. The Minnesota Vikings, out of likely just out of caution, have closed their facilities temporarily. There's work being done remotely by the Titans. They have to test and lock this down, and players that test positive have to be isolated. And I would think, would see a completely different setup for them next week. And since it's only 3 players and 5 personnel, we don't know who those personnel are yet. It could be a different. I mean, 3 players, depending on which 3 they are, it may not be a big deal. It's a large roster on an NFL team. So it will be interesting to see if this changes things for them going forward for the next week or two. What we've learned too over the last 6 months is that athletes get over this. Athletes do; they get better, but that you may experience fatigue after, and you may experience that fatigue for weeks. The St. Louis Blues in the NHL, they were experiencing that fatigue for quite a while after. And they didn't use that as an excuse for not winning the playoffs, but they did feel like that definitely didn't help. The Vikings have closed things down. We haven't heard anything about a positive test from them, but Tennessee we have. And this is, we saw this kind of thing happen with the Major League Baseball season. Hopefully, this is just a one off, as it seemed to be with the baseball season, where you just had a couple of instances and then things got better. I want to throw in here as well the Chiefs may very well still be the best team in football. We saw them win a Super Bowl last year. Technically early in 2020. Remember early in 2020 before everything was all on fire? I remember. Anyways, the Kansas City Chiefs may very well still be the best team in football. Green Bay will have something to say about it. There are other 3-0 teams that may have something to say about it, but the Chiefs look pretty darn good, and we'll see. We'll see how strong they are as the season progresses. Now, I want to pivot as well to baseball. I am wearing my Padres jersey. I just don't have the Friar patch on it yet, but I do have the Friar patch, so I'm going to get the Friar patch. The Brewers and the Astros are in the playoffs with a losing record, and what also upset people is that they decided, well, if we need a tiebreaker, let's use last year's records. Rob Manfred, you're something, man. I don't know. I don't know about using a team's just last year's records. I can't imagine a sport where that would be acceptable. I cannot imagine any sport where a team would say, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can just use last year's record. What? Why? How? What? No. So that's we've got the Astros in the playoffs. We've got the Brewers in the playoffs, basically on the strength of last year's record, and we'll see how they do. The Astros start things off tonight against the Twins. I'm going to be cheering heartily for the Twins in that. I apologize to fans of the Houston Astros, but based on the whole scandal and the garbage cans, sorry. If the Astros went on a run right now, I don't think it'd be that feel-good story. It would be one of the most 2020 things you could have happen, of course. So I'm hoping for the Twins also because, it'd be nice to see them do something again. And the A's. I want to see the Oakland A's win a World Series somehow, some way, at some point. And they start their trek against the White Sox. So it's winnable, but it's the A's. So, see, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, they should be able to win this, but they're also the A's. So that makes it more difficult because the A's historically, at least since the early 90s, it's been a while since they were really at championship caliber level. So it'd be nice to see it happen again. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Moneyball. What of it? All right, Blue Jays and Rays also start things off. Shoemaker, I've always thought that you go with your best pitcher to start things off, and they're going with Ryu in game two. The bet is that maybe they get the win over the Rays in game one and use a platoon of pitchers, and then in the second game they look to lock it down with Ryu. I think you use your best pitcher in game one, and then you have two other opportunities to finish them off. Because the other option is the Rays light up Shoemaker, and whoever comes in as a reliever after that, and then you make it so that Ryu has to pitch a fantastic game in game two, or you're done. I will say this: a 32-28 record for the Jays looks a heck of a lot better than what they put up last year. It at least it validates my belief the team's going to get better. They did. And I do think the future's pretty bright for the Jays if they can hold this together, and that's always an if with them. But they always seem to be that team that either they can score or they can pitch. And so we'll see whether or not they can score or pitch against the Rays tonight. And the Yankees are against the Indians. You know, I'm going to go ahead and say the Yankees win it because I'm not a Yankees fan. And in general, that's how baseball works, is the Yankees go a few years without one, and then they'll win one because, sure. And, yeah, I'm not saying that they win it all, but I would not be surprised to see them knock out Cleveland, because Cleveland has a bit of a reputation of being a team that when they're the home team and they're favorites in sports in general, that they may find a way to pull a loss where there should be a victory. Speaking of which, now the Cleveland Browns are 2-1. They're above 500 for the first time in a while. And you wonder, okay, now what? When's it going to fall apart? And I hate to say that because I'd like to see the Cleveland Browns turn things around, but that's the first thought in my head is, all right, so how are they going to blow this? So we'll see what happens with baseball tonight. You guys can let me know who you think wins the games tonight. I'm not sure how much of this I'm going to be able to see. I'll try to check out some baseball here and there. Now that hockey is officially over and all that other wonderful stuff. And we've got football coming up this weekend. I'm going to assume the Titans and the Vikings are going to play this weekend and that we're going to be able to figure this out. If not, there's got to be some plans at the NFL head office in order to fix this, right? I would think that they could just add a week at the end of the year. A week 18 to make up games that get lost, and that they would hope, fingers crossed, that it's just 1 week that they need. There are bye weeks you can take away if you need to, but again, you'd have to make sure that teams that both had a bye week at the same time were affected, or you have to move the whole schedule around. It's going to be interesting to see what the NFL does, because I know that the NHL is sitting and watching, and they'll watch and see how they handle these positive cases and all that other wonderful stuff. The one thing that does help with the NFL is this 1 game a week, whereas other sports, it's more than that. Baseball, you can have 5-6 games in a week. Hockey, you're looking at 3 or 4 games in a week. And this is part of the reason why one thing that's possible is we see a modified bubble environment for the NHL next season. And, of course, a protected environment for baseball in the postseason. But the big key thing for all these major leagues, fans. Fans in attendance is key for almost any sport. And even as we're seeing the NBA get ready for LeBron to go against the Heat, even I'm curious to see how that's going to go. I've had that discussion about whether or not there's parity. I think it's just a matter of, so which team's LeBron on? Okay, so that's going to be in the finals then, right? And I think that's a conversation to be had at some point. I may do a video at some stage on LeBron versus MJ. Because to me, Michael Jordan was the best basketball player of all time. But LeBron's making it harder and harder for me to make that argument. Because he goes to other organizations and wins. And Michael didn't do that. Michael, in Washington, it wasn't the same. So it's a discussion to be had. And to be had about whether or not LeBron goes and then brings other players in that elevate that team. Or if LeBron's presence is worth some wins. If it's worth some wins, especially in the postseason. So at some point, I'll take a look at that. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.